Good day, my name is Martin Engelbrecht and I have been in forestry since 1988, and I'm going to give a Forestry Valuation Course. This is the introduction to the course, and I'm going to be talking about the course overview. Each talk, there's 20 talks, and I'll be going through each talk, what I'm going to be talking about, and then as well as my experience and my curriculum vitae and additional reading material. Great, so there's just a few terms and conditions. These are the terms and conditions. They will appear on your screen. There's individual lectures that you can purchase, and the course is unregistered, so there's no continual professional development points offered. And all the talks will be available on my website, forestryvaluations.co.za. Also, just a disclaimer, obviously I've checked the course through. I've got a few colleagues that have looked at the course. Forestry valuations are complex, so one needs to apply the course with the necessary knowledge and wisdom. Forestry valuations the liability is limited to the cost of the course, and we cannot be held responsible for information that you use on the course. Okay, course overview, talk 1. So this is the course overview and objectives. So first course, I'm giving an overview of the course, my forestry background, my experience, as well as additional reading material on forestry and forestry valuations. On talk 2, I'll be looking at a site visit, and I'm mainly there going through the photographs that I've taken over the years of different forests. And I'm looking at the valuation, how the valuation instruction and the field observations, as well as how to decide what methodology to use, and then to put it in a spreadsheet or document. So one's actually selling a document that has the information that comes from a site visit and what to look at when you go on a site visit. And then talk 3, we'll be looking at technical terms in evaluation. So it's very important with any subject, you've got a lot of terms and that need to be explained and need to be understood. So I'm going to be using a lot of terms, jargon, forestry valuation jargon if you want, and you need to understand this. So we'll be going through that. Talk 4, we're looking at the life cycle of a timber plantation. So I'm going to just talk about the definitions and the explanation of the various activities in the life cycle of different types of forests. I'm looking at particularly the genus of a pine sawlog plantation, and then a gum pole plantation, as well as a wattle pulpwood plantation. Then on talk 4, I'm looking at the time value of money. And if we think of 100 Rand today, it's not the same as 100 Rand 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So, or 100 Rand in 20 years' time. So we use discounted cash flow models, and we need to take values that are far out in terms of 10 years out. We need to put them into a present value. So I'll be giving those formulas and explaining that. Then we're looking at talk 6. We're looking at the management objective and the volume over the rotation. So understanding silvicultural policy and how it impacts the form and growth of trees. We're looking at activity costs in talk 7. So activity costs, say it costs 12,000 Rand to establish trees, then that is made of men, materials, machines, and miscellaneous. And you can actually divide that quite accurately if need be. Go into some detail there. On talk 8, I'm looking at normalized net income. It's very important. If you have a 10-hectare plantation and there's a 10-year rotation, so you're cutting down 1 hectare each year, it's important there that you know what is your net income if the plantation is normalized. Because you also have a 10-hectare plantation and you can have one 10-hectare block, and you're cutting down everything in one year. So, and every time I'm looking at the pine sawlogs, gum poles, and wattle pulpwood. Then I've got a brief history of Africa and South African forestry and the timber industry, and that's talk 9. and I'll be discussing some key points, looking at the area planted, the volume processed and sold from these plantations, and also looking at a few trends in the forestry industry. Talk 10, I look at the key inputs into a timber plantation valuation. So I discuss those key variables when valuing a timber plantation. And then I'm starting to go into a little bit of nitty-gritty here in terms of, in Talk 11, the forestry valuation methods. So there's various methods you can use to value a plantation. You're not going to get the same answer. And they actually accumulate cost value, fastman value, net salvage value, and a discounted cash flow. They're going to give you different answers. And some of those answers are going to be related to the market value or fair value. So I'll be going into that as well. And each time, as I said, I'm looking at the pine saw logs, gum poles, and wattle pulpwood. Lovely. Let's go to Talk 12. So then, as I said to you in the beginning, the documentation brings the site visit. It brings all the calculations that you do in the spreadsheet, and it puts it in a way that somebody can understand. Often I'm doing these valuations for people that are not experts, not forestry valuation experts. They are financial managers or they are foresters. It's that whole documentation process needs to be as clear as possible. And this includes the buying and selling scenario, the spread of fire, determination of insurance values, and the greenfield. So each of those documents are going to look different. Then in Talk 13, I'm going to look at the effect of the age class distribution on the cash flow and value. And as I mentioned already, if you have a plantation that's 10 hectares and it's a 10-year rotation, it's going to look completely different to a valuation where you've got an even spread of the area. Talk 14, I'm selecting the right valuation method. You've got all these different valuation methods, and you need to, with the instruction given, determine which valuation method is correct. Often it helps a client if they have 3 different valuation methods, especially if you're deciding to sell a plantation or buy a plantation. You would want to know what is the accumulated cost value, what is the asset strip or net salvage value, and what's in terms of a discounted cash flow model. So there's various ways of looking at a plantation value, and I describe this fully in Talk 14. Talk 15, we're looking at the weighted average cost of capital. So I already talked about the fact that timber plantations are looking at a long-term crop. So you've got a value that's in 10 years' time, and that needs to be drawn to a present value. And then you've even got a method to work out that discount rate. So it's not a discount rate that you just, it's scientifically put together, mathematically put together. There's various inputs that go into that, and I just discuss the input into that. Then Talk 16, you've got the optimal age to clear fell from a technical and financial point of view. You've got a lot of capital locked in a plantation, and you need to decide when is the optimal time to actually cut that plantation or clear fell that plantation. And I'll be using a few models to point when that is the best time. You've also got the market that is demanding a certain size of a pole, so it can also be a market driven. After all, we're selling our produce to our timber to the market, so it's important to have you have to sell into the market. Great. 17, looking at determining land rentals for various management objectives. So to be able to pay a rental on a piece of plantation, you have to also consider what is the net income. So you've got a land value, you've got a percentage of the land value, of a rental as a percentage of the land value. You've also got the rental as a percentage of the net income. To ensure sustainability. There's no ways that a plantation can pay 50% of its net income as a rental. So I share some of my secrets that I've learned over the years. I've done quite a number of calculations in the SAFCOL group in terms of rental of forestry. So my model's been used there. Then talk 18, we're looking at the timber plantation insurance. So when companies take out timber plantation insurance, they use a certain model. You can use just about any model, but obviously you're going to be insured for a value that's based on that model, and you're going to be paid out based on that model. And it's quite important where it comes to salvage. We found that very young plantations, large fires, where you've got a fire that's large, you're going to, and the market is basically for small timber is basically destroyed because there's such a surplus on the market, and it's difficult to put those, it's not economical or viable to put that small timber into a log bank. And then you have to adjust your insurance. And the way you take out insurance is kind of the way you get paid out. So there's various methods that I look at and the advantages and disadvantages of each of those methods. Looking at talk 19, spread of fire, I've been involved in a number of calculations to determine the spread of fire. And I will show you how to put a document together that'll stand in terms of a court case, that'll stand up to the scrutiny of a court case. The merits are often separated from the actual claim. So once the merits have been established that the party is guilty and going to have to pay, and then obviously my calculation comes in. There's a list of actions that need to be completed after a fire. That's very, very important. Often the court cases are between 2 and 5 years later. So it's important that those list of actions are all completed at the time of the fire, because it's too late to go 5 years later and go and do those actions. If that information has not been gathered, it will be lost. Finally, I discuss a landmark ruling which will set the precedent for the use of the Forestry value formula as the basis for compensation. So I look at that Forestry formula, and that drives the whole basis of compensation, and that's actually sets a precedent. Great. My last talk then is talk 20, and it's to do with the baboon damage, and I give how many hectares that's been damaged, as well as a rand value. There's lots of, I did a study with Phil Richardson, and there's lots of people, lots of scientists that are talking about baboon damage, but they're not really quantifying it. And in my study, I make a few assumptions, and then I try and quantify it. How much is the baboon damage in terms of hectares, and then what is the value of that damage, and how much is it actually costing the industry? Great. So after every talk, I'm going to have a few discussion questions, which I will give the answers to. And then if you're interested and want a certificate at the end of the course, you're welcome to do all the modules, and I will issue a certificate. And then those questions will be assignment questions that you will answer at home and that I will mark. So just to go now to some of my experience and background. In 1985, I started Stellenbosch University, and I did a Bachelor of Economics. And then I started in 1988, I worked for the Department of Environment Affairs at the Directorate National Forestry Planning, collecting forestry statistics as commercial timber resources and groundwood processing. I produced that documentation for a few years, and then I went to forest management. That's all the category A plantations. And I was under Paul Marwick, and I worked with him for all my years, in fact, as a forest economist. And we were looking at mainly forestry cost models. So I'm better a forest economist. I'm more of a forest economist than a valuer, and I really understand forestry economics. So I've got a good understanding of forestry economics because I've done a lot of forestry cost models, and then I've also done the valuations as well. So in 1993, I moved into SAFCOL. We did activity cost models. I also was involved in the sales program. And then I did the valuation claims in terms of insurance policy and purchase of plantations. Then in 2003, I moved down to Hermanus, and I've been a forest economist and valuing timber in Southern Africa. I've been to Mozambique 3 times, and I've done desktop valuations in terms of Uganda, Tanzania, and Mozambique. I did that for 2 years, and I also did a greenfields project in Angola, desktop valuation, just with all the inputs coming in from a third party. Then I've also done a national diploma in real estate. So that's the valuation diploma. I've done that, but I have not done the practical, and I'm not a valuer as such. I don't value land, I'm valuing trees. 2006, I've did the diploma in alternative dispute resolution from University of Pretoria, and just to broaden my skills in terms of dispute resolution. Should you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact me. I find that WhatsApp messages are better than phone calls. So you're always welcome to send me a WhatsApp message. I'll get back to you within a few hours. And as I mentioned there, the course doesn't qualify you for continual professional development points. Great. So just a point that I want to make in terms of people use extensively standard valuation tables, and sometimes we don't realize how much there's the variance between using a standard valuation table and actually using the inputs. And that court case that I mentioned that set a precedent in terms of using the Fastman value, it also set a precedent in terms of using the particular plantation's valuation inputs. So you should use the activity cost for that plantation and not just use averages. So that's important. So, and I know that plantations are nowadays 1 hectare of a pine sawlog plantation can be worth anything between 150,000 to 250,000 rand a hectare at rotation age. So it's well worth to spend a few thousand rand on a valuation that has the inputs relating to that particular forest. So looking at the glossary of acronyms, I've got a whole list of acronyms that I use. I'll try and every time use the full name first before I start using the acronym. Looking at resources, I've got a whole list of resources. A lot of these are free, and it's well worth to just broaden one's outlook. Having Google is like having your own library. So over the years, I just looked at what one can Google in terms of forestry valuations. So I would encourage you just to go through these. A lot of them are free, and they're extremely well documented and interesting and give a lot of insight. There's one in particular that I think I just want to highlight, and that's number 13. It's the Forestry Handbook, and I think it's about 600 Rand, and it's well worth getting that Forestry Handbook. It's got a little bit about plantation valuations, but it's a good beginning. And it gives you all the inputs that would go and all the silvicultural practices, a lot about the actual growing of the trees, and it makes good reading. And it's important if you are valuing timber to understand all those concepts. Great. and also to look at the financial statements of various forestry companies. I know York does a fantastic financial statement, as well as Safcol. You can read the financial statements there, and then focusing on the biological asset valuation. So looking at the biological asset valuation and all the inputs and what they actually discuss there, there's a lot of insight there. Great. Well, we'll see you on the course. Hopefully we'll see you on the course, and you're welcome to purchase one or as many talks as you want to. All my details are on the website, forestryvaluations.co.za. My name is Martin Engelbrecht. Thank you for listening.